beautiful people. Welcome to the MIZZES Best Reviews channel. We are here today to go over another documentary review. This is going to be probably an ongoing review. I'm not going to go over every episode, but this documentary series is titled Dirty Rotten Scandals. It does air on the network, for anybody interested in where you can watch it. And I'm sure it's probably somewhere on an app, but I watched it just on cable from but this is a new documentary series where they're going to go over the scandals and things that went on or go on in the background of some of, it looks like, America's most beloved shows, from talk shows to reality TV. So episodes 1 and 2 of E's Dirty Rotten Scandals covered the Dr. Phil show, which a lot of us are familiar about. I also feel like the Dr. Phil show, I know it's over in today's time, but I feel like those last couple years before it ended in the 2010s was the Hot Mess Express. And this documentary kind of sheds light into some of it. So I used to be a Dr. Phil show fan. Obviously, I work in mental health and psychology. So anything that gives that on television interests me just a little bit. Ergo, why I chose major. However, Dr. Phil, you are proving a lot of negative stereotypes about people with money, people with education, and things of that nature. You're proving them to be correct in all the worst ways. And it's really kind of unfortunate. It's like, not Phil McGraw. But they start this documentary in episode 1. It was 2 parts. So we start episode 1 with us being reminded of how Dr. Phil came to be someone that was so popular, especially in daytime television. And for those who do not know, we got Dr. Phil through Oprah. Oprah was huge in talk television and daytime television for years and years and years. Most people accredit him to knowing her. And honestly, Dr. Phil working with Oprah, especially for a lot of members of the Black community that watched his show, that connected us to him. So it kind of gave him a little bit of validity. And I always say, especially working in healthcare, like, just because someone's a doctor doesn't mean you should just trust all the things that they say, how they say it. It doesn't mean that their opinion is law. So what ends up happening is Oprah explains she met him going through her trial. I encourage everyone to Google that. There was a lot going on back in the 90s and early 2000s. And she ended up bringing Dr. Phil on her show as a guest, and they eventually loved him so much in the commentary that they made him into his own show. He was his own entity. He had all of those great things. So his show takes off and it does okay. But this is where we get to a point where we meet the investigative journalist who used to work for the Boston Globe, which is a popular news source of journalists. And her name is Evan Allen. And she points out that Dr. Phil has not renewed his medical license since 2006. So he's not a doctor. In order to be considered and called a doctor, you need to have your medical license of some sort. He does not have that. So I knew this because my mother, for those who do not know, my mother is a licensed therapist. So she used to always make me aware when we would watch Dr. Phil, like, hey, this guy is in no way an actual licensed practitioner. He can give you advice, he can refer you out, but he can't really do anything. So Evan Allen points out that this is where she noticed that the show changed for the worse. Once he lost his medical license, the conduct that you get with a licensed clinician also went out the door. Now, she describes the show pretty much as taking a turn into like whatever is like super entertaining or whatever's going to provide a wow factor. I like to compare it to like the show went from Dr. Phil Montel shows that we used to respect to like Maury, Jerry Springer type energy, except with a little bit of counsel. It's kind of like when they put people in reality shows today who are having conflict with one another, when they put like a therapist in the room to try and help them mediate, but it doesn't actually do nothing. It doesn't actually do nothing. So things got bad for guests who were coming on Dr. Phil. I think of it as the Maury for therapy. And, you know, people explain some egregious things. Now, this documentary did good because they had people commenting who were former show guests from early versions of the show to past and more stuff toward the present. They had people who worked for the show. A lot of them did not show their face because they wanted to protect their, they wanted to remain anonymous. I can't blame them. They don't want to get sued. We had a lot of different people who have come across or worked with Dr. Phil that commented. So I'm like, okay, that adds some validity to what y'all trying to do. Because at first, I'm not going to lie, I did not trust E to do this, but I have to remember the E True Hollywood Stories from years and years ago. E knows how to do a documentary if they want to, y'all. They know how. But we start with the first person who was on the show, and her name is Emily Jones. She was on the show back in 2011. Her story is she was a teenager. I believe she was 15 or 16. She ended up getting pregnant, and she described it as this. She said, I got pregnant. I knew I was young, but I didn't want to just abort my child. I wanted to deal with the ramifications and the consequences of my action. I said, wow, I don't see the problem in that. There's a lot of problems in teen pregnancy. This is not the video to get into it. Unless y'all want to comment on it, I'd be happy to discuss it in the comments. But no man, in my opinion, should be telling a woman what to do with her body, especially if she's at the age to have privacy with her doctor as HIPAA is related, which 15, 16 you do. So she wanted to keep her baby. She says that her mother was supportive as she could be. And she says that her stepfather got angry about the fact that she wound up a teen mom, or a teen that was pregnant. And because her stepfather was unhappy with her pregnancy, her mom felt like she had to choose between her husband and her child. So she tried to meet in the middle and decided to write the Dr. Phil show. I didn't understand this with a lot of the parents of the people who were kids on here. Y'all be having health insurance and stuff. Even if you got federal government insurance, you can call up your health plan and be like, what do y'all cover within mental health? Why do you need to send her to Dr. Phil? Like, what is he going to do in the situation of a teen being pregnant other than talk to her about her feelings? And I work in mental health. What the hell is he going to do? So for her mom to even think that way made no sense, but it does show the power that television had, I would say, in like the early 2000s, them 2010s, the earlier years of that, as well as the 90s. Like, never trust a person that's on television claiming to be for health. The people who are really for health understands that people do better in private than in front of a live studio audience. I'm just saying. But, it doesn't go well. So they end up getting invited to the show after her mom wrote into the show because the stepdad had something up his behind. And she kept saying, from the moment that she heard she was going to be on the show to the moment that she was right about to walk on stage, she kept saying, I do not want to do this. She doesn't want to go. And the show pretty much left out a lot. They made her seem like this ignorant, selfish, teenage pregnant lady. Dr. Phil asked her a question like, so you want to have a baby and you think you're going to raise the baby and they're going to pay for it? Which is actually a valid thing. I don't think teenagers realize when they get pregnant, you don't have an ID. You don't have nothing. How are you going to support this kid when you can only get permission from your school through a work permit at that age to work for a couple hours a day? Like, realistically, you cannot provide for a child at that age unless your parents are paying for you. So I understood Dr. Phil in that point, but she didn't need that lesson on national television. That's something, in my opinion, her parents should have explained to her. You know, her mom could have been like, listen, I'm going to support you because I have to, because you're my child, but I'm not changing a single diaper. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing that. And you need to show some type of initiative. Like, the mom could have been supportive while also teaching her responsibility. It didn't have to. Why would you bring your child on television to announce to the world that she's pregnant anyway, so young? I've never understood the teen mom craze and all of that, but I'll digress, y'all. But she basically feels like the show is responsible for some great anxiety she has. She says after she left the show, she felt deprived of her right to choose to keep her baby. She went home and she felt embarrassed. And she felt like the world felt like she was wrong and people were against her. And honestly, it's an unfortunate thing. But I mean, I can understand how for a teenager, that could be something so heavy. I can definitely understand that. Before we go further, y'all take a moment and give the video a like if you are still here 10 minutes in. Consider subscribing if you're still here a little bit later. There's lots of good content. If you're just here for documentary reviews, we do have a playlist on the channel that you can click that literally is just dedicated to documentaries, as well as other playlists for all of the other content that we do on this channel. But I do appreciate the support from everybody in Thug Life. Now, Emily Jones lets us know at the end of the documentary, just because I'm not going to come back to her too much, but she lets us know she did have her baby in spite of going on the show. I respect that. It shows she had a strong mind. She did not let him change her mind. And her daughter is doing well. Her daughter is thriving. As she said, her daughter is everything Dr. Phil said that her child would not be just because she came from a teen mom. Unfortunately, teen moms do happen, but I don't know if y'all remember or paid attention in health class or history class. Back in the day, women was having babies as soon as they started bleeding. Okay, so it's unrealistic, yes, but if you're a teen mom and you have parents that are supporting you, and your child comes out great, thank your parents, because you didn't just do that on your own. That's all I'll say. But I don't think it's the end of the world if you have a baby when you're a teenager. I have friends who did it and they ended up successful. And then I have other friends that had babies while young and they didn't. I think it depends on the person, their work ethic, and their support system around them. It really does take a village. But I'm glad that Emily's doing okay. And I hope that her panic attacks and anxiety attacks get better. The next person who went on the show that was a guest that they discussed is a lady named Angelique Robo. She was a guest in 2011 as well. That was an interesting season that year. And Angelique, I remember her story because it was all over the news. Somebody came to this woman's house when she was pregnant. This person came to her house, was her friend, who she believed to be a friend. She said she had her back turned to the friend and was getting ready or something, and the lady stabbed her. She said that she ended up calling the police, and the police ended up, not doing much, it sounds like, but it turned out the lady plotted to kill her. I was like, wait, what? Where do you live and how can I never move there? Like, the lady was trying to unalive Angelique, and then she had tools there because she plotted to perform a C-section and take her unborn child. I'm like, what in the world is going on? That is crazy. It reminds me of that story, that Lifetime movie about that girl who was stolen from the hospital at birth. I can't remember her name. She went on the Yanla. That's crazy that people actually plan like that. Y'all, there are adoption agencies, sperm banks, surrogacy. Like, if you can't have a baby, it's not the end of the world. It doesn't make you any less of a woman. But if you insist on having a child to raise, there are plenty of children waiting on adoption, plenty of children needing to be fostered. You have other options, but to do that is crazy. Literally, she was stabbed in her back. So I felt for her story. But the news, obviously, her story got out. The news was all over it. And she says she chose to go on the Dr. Phil show because they were much kinder to her versus how other reporters seemed like they just wanted to rush and get the story. So she ends up going on the show, and she describes the experience as feeling like she was rushed in and out, and says that she felt embarrassed and humiliated on the show so bad that this lady says still today she is trying to work through it in therapy. Now, what ended up happening is Dr. Phil made it seem like she was so nice and too nice, and a little so nice that she was an airhead or dumb to not see that this lady was trying to unalive her was coming, which is crazy, because who expects in their everyday life for someone that they're friends with to not only want to unalive them, but to then perform an unauthorized C-section to rip my unborn child from my body? Like, what do you mean? She should have seen that coming. The fact that Dr. Phil in the audience live was crazy, but she ended up feeling like, because of it, and that's the psychology of the social psychology, and why we should not bully others and why we have to be careful how we treat people, because she left the Dr. Phil show feeling like everything was her fault. She felt like that attack was her fault. That is extremely traumatic. I doubt Angelique could see this, but girl, that wasn't your fault. And nobody should have laughed. Nobody should have laughed. Definitely not okay. The next person we get to is a producer named Jack Mendoza. I have some questions, and I'm wondering if y'all who watch this have questions too. Why was Jack Mendoza the only producer on this show that wanted to show his face? He gave us his name and face for what we know, but he was a producer who worked on the Dr. Phil show from 2003 to 2007. So about 4 years. He says he was told to make guests feel like stars and provide them with the luxury experience before they go on the show. He spoke of the anxiety and the discomfort in the office and what it was like working for Dr. Phil. And he says that Dr. Phil intentionally caused, well, he alludes that Dr. Phil allegedly intentionally caused a fearful environment. Because of what I watched in this documentary, please see the disclaimer in the description and going across the bottom of this screen. Everything that I say, all commentary, is my personal opinion based on what I have seen on television and is for entertainment purposes only. So don't be coming for B3ST. Don't do it. Please don't. I just have to say that because this documentary showed us that Dr. Phil liked to sue people to keep them quiet, which I understand. If I was rich, I'd be suing people to shut them the hell up too myself. But, you know, got to protect myself, since sometimes you never know who's watching your channel. You never know who's looking. You never know who you've struck a nerve with. But we're going to get back into the victims because Jack Mendoza, I feel like E used him to just kind of show there's some shadiness to the culture of working for him just as much as there is for going on the show, you know? And I can't judge either or because the producers want to keep their job. It's a doggy dog world in Hollywood, I've heard. Definitely not for everybody, but a lot of these people, it's probably their dream to work in these fields. And then for the people going on the show, they're trying to solve their problem and they're thinking this guy has to be good and they'll get some free help. That's what you kept hearing pretty much. So the most intricate and heart-wrenching story belonged, in my opinion, to Marcy Newberry. You could tell before this lady even spoke when she came on the screen that she's hurting. Like you could tell that she's seen things, she's gone through things that she just cannot get out of her head. And that she probably wishes that would just like stop replaying in her mind. Like you could tell that she was definitely like a little bit challenged or disturbed in the mind from the things that she's had to go through. And I feel for her. But she speaks about going on the Dr. Phil show in 2017. She was 17 years old at that time. And she was a guest. I remember watching that episode and thinking, what the hell is he doing? I remember watching that episode like, oh my God, I saw the rerun during COVID and was like, they let this air? Oh Lord. But at 17 years old, she speaks about her brother, her biological brother, molesting her. And she said that this had happened twice in her childhood. The result was that her mother decided to sign her rights to her brother away, and he went on to live in the foster care system instead of being held accountable for essaying his younger sister. Now, she tells us that her brother never had to register as an SEX offender or anything like that, but he turned 18 and went to live with her father. And I'm looking at the dad, like, is that where these behaviors come from? Because why are you protecting a son that's touched on women? Like, I get that you're supposed to like love your kids, but he's a predator, quite literally. But he goes to live with the father. Marcy, she continued to live with her mom, and she says that her mother ended up very concerned about her little brother becoming a reoffender. I guess her mom had the concern that her little brother would hurt other people. And because of that, she called the Dr. Phil show instead of calling the police, which baffles me, but I'll digress. And Marcy went into therapy for years. And eventually the Dr. Phil show calls, and she says she didn't want to go on the show because she had already worked through it in therapy. And I can relate to her on this. Unfortunately, I have been a victim of SA, and therapy helps you, but the worst thing you could do is relive your trauma by having to describe it over and over, having to hear about it. And Marcy had to relive her trauma, and I think every worst way that one could imagine. And I actually really felt for her. I really did. So she goes on to the show. She says she didn't want to, but the show pretty much threatened her and was like, if you don't come on this show, then we're not going to help your family or any of that. She says that they made her go over the details of what her brother did to her over and over. She got frustrated and asked to stop. And producers told her that if she leaves, then her family will have to figure out how to get home on their own. If you're not from California, it's a state that's more expensive than other states. So if you're flying in a regular family from the middle of America, they don't have the hundreds of dollars for a plane ticket. So to threaten to not take her family back, and you did that to a 17-year-old, and this is supposed to be a show on mental health and psychology, you should know that a 17-year-old's brain is going to feel like, oh crap, I'm trapped, or I have to do this. That was manipulation. Like, it's not okay. So she ends up going on the show because of that. And her time on the show is extremely odd. She was definitely exploited for ratings, which disgusted me. The only thing the show really did to protect her was to change her name. On the show, she went by Addison. What the fudge does changing a name matter if we still got the face of the whole family on national television? In 2017, technology was advanced enough to figure out who them people was. So I'm looking at Dr. Phil like, you ain't slick, Dr. Phil. Y'all ain't slick. That wasn't right. I feel like if they were doing this with like other little dumb issues, fine. But when it comes to issues that really impede and impact people, like we saw someone on the show who we'll talk about later with schizoaffective disorder. We saw people struggling with substance abuse and addiction issues. And then you have molestation and SA. And you guys can't, at least for those subjects, take stuff more seriously. Crazy. Crazy. Dr. Phil may feel like he got away with this legally, but morally and ethically, you're disgusting and wrong. You're disgusting and wrong because at one point you did hold a doctorate degree and understand the gravity and the ethics that someone who works in the field of mental health has to follow. And we absolutely do take them seriously. So I don't like seeing this. And then even just working in mental health, I see a lot of, I'm not gonna lie, I see a lot of crappy providers and clinicians that make me question the field as a whole sometimes. And it's unfortunate to see that Dr. Phil's one of them, but no shade, I'm not surprised. I am not surprised at all. But she gets on the show and they play a recording of her brother talking about how he used to touch on his sister, which for somebody that does something like that could make him want to do it again. So this is just irresponsible from which direction you look at it. Let me know how y'all feel in the comments, but it's hella irresponsible and insensitive and morally and ethically just wrong. But she was re-traumatized. She says she got really quiet and was uncomfortable. After the show, she says she could not get the sound of him detailing what he did to her out of her head. And so she took 30 pills and she attempted to unalive herself. She did survive. She woke up in a psychiatric facility where she was committed, and her life has struggled as well as her family. I'm happy to see that she survived and is here today. And I hope that she knows her life has so much value. I hope she knows it wasn't her fault. And I don't even know what to say. I really felt for her. That's just a lot. I commend her for telling her story because that's a scary thing to do. And for her to go from trying to unalive herself to be able to speak out is more than courageous, is heroic. So good for her. I wish her well. I really do. Unfortunately, things did not go so great with her family. She has no relationship with her father. Can't blame her. Why are you cool as my abuser? Her mother declined from feeling bad. So her mother has to live in a nursing home. And her brother is in prison because her mom was right. He did reoffend. So that was like the saddest thing. I said, oh, Lord. God bless that family, except the brother and the dad. I said it. Because anybody that's okay, supports, and protects someone that SAs someone, you are vile and you can go under the jail with them and under the earth into the depths of hell. Like, it really impacts you for the rest of your life. So that's why I can't understand why Dr. Phil, when you're trained in mental health, you know that it impacts people. But my God, I guess sometimes you have to go through it to understand it. But my God, Dr. Phil, my God. Now, We see in the first episode, it pretty much concludes with Evan telling us about another guest who came on the show drunk. I do remember seeing this guy. But it turns out that the Dr. Phil show was placing stuff in the rooms, the dressing rooms and hotel rooms of the people that were on the show so that they could come on. And I always kind of questioned that. I would say around 2017 to 2020, I started to question Dr. Phil because I did used to watch a lot of Dr. Phil, and I found it odd. Like, I've worked with all types of people, but even the biggest crackhead will show up sober or act right to like an appointment or something that they need or like something like that. So I feel like he played into the stereotype and stigmas that come with the issues people have. And him putting alcohol allegedly into the room of an alcoholic who's coming on the show for help, then breathalyzing him when y'all see that he's drunk and tore up, and then using it as a point to say that anybody that's just drunk is near death, but to not send him to the hospital after saying someone is near death is crazy. And no shade to Evan, who is the investigative journalist. Bitch, I appreciate the work that you did in investigating and bringing this out. I respect people who do that, but do not attack the audience. Do not attack the guests who went on the show. Attack the production and the people who worked within, because somebody should have stuck up. But the people who watched this stuff, we didn't know what was going on. We just watch the television. There's also a lack of education in America, especially in the 2000s, about mental health and psychology. So they're probably thinking this is as good as it gets. That's why you see people like Dr. Phil and Iyanla Vanzant who have no background to do what they're doing it. It's just how it was back then. Now with social media and how technology has advanced, it's more difficult for people to play each other, if y'all know what I mean. So, you know, Aaron did the most. But we get to the second episode, beautiful people. If you are still here, love and light to you. You have hung in there. I don't know how this video would do. I am trying something new. The people voted. They would like to see more documentary reviews. So that's what we're doing. But I do hope you consider liking the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, or share it, whatever you choose. But we get to the second episode, and the investigative journalist, Evan, pretty much lets us know that she contacted the Dr. Phil show several times about the claims, and she felt like they were hiding something because they could never answer questions straight. And this is where we meet other people who went on the show. And I remember watching these people as well. Dave and Marla Thomas, a Black couple that was on the show in 2017 because they had a son that was suffering from schizoaffective disorder, and they could not afford a facility for him to be in. So their option was to move their son into the home. These facilities are expensive unless you have amazing insurance. 9 times out of 10, you're not getting into it. I worked in a facility for people, a residential treatment facility for people who suffer from schizoaffective disorder here in the Bay Area. And 90% of them are just there. There's no treatment. It felt like a way to just house them. And then we ship them off to appointments for meds here and there. And that's it. And they took their Social Security checks as they rent. I crap you not. I cannot say the name of the organization or I'll end up in some legal trouble, but these facilities aren't always the best, but sometimes they're necessary for people who just may not be able to have a huge quality of life based on a mental struggle. But their son ended up going missing after he lived with them, and he somehow ended up being found by the producers of the Dr. Phil show. They found him and they called his parents and told them, your son's going to be on the show. So the parents showed up. Now, while he was on the show, the mother, Marla, made it clear, and I agreed with her, he was clearly in a psychiatric episode. Clearly. People who have no educational background would be able to figure out that that man was in some type of an episode. And Dr. Phil kind of just allowed him to act that way. And they say, as parents, they dealt with it because they had tried everything else for their child. And they dealt with it because they figured, well, at least Dr. Phil can get some treatment paid for him. So they go on the show and their son agrees to get help. And he goes to a place called Creative Care. And this is a facility that the parents describe as a start of a nightmare for them and their child. So their son, DJ, was only in Creative Care for 2 weeks. He was kicked out for disturbing behavior, which is crazy because As someone who's worked in mental health facilities, you deal with disturbing behavior all day. You literally deal with that. I used to not tell my husband some of the things I saw or dealt with because he would be like, oh my God, and concerned. But for those who work in mental health, they understand this is the norm and you're trained to deal with it. Sometimes, not all the time. But in my case, I was trained to deal with it. I do well with people tripping. Sometimes you just got to listen in a line and go with the delusion, and it helped calm them down. But you got to also get to know the clientele that you're helping. These type of facilities that Dr. Phil was sending people to were obviously not facilities where they had people working there who had skills to solve problems, had the patience to deal with people who are struggling with their mental health, because you have to have a lot of patience to deal with them. But he got kicked out of the facility. I was like, y'all kicked him out of the facility without telling his parents? He walked from Malibu to downtown Los Angeles, ends up going to jail. Creative Care said they would take him back if he agreed to do the injection of medications. For those who do not know, you can take pills for psychiatric meds, but you can also get injections that last for a month. I like to say the 2.5 week special, because after 2.5 weeks, it wears off and then you still got to wait. But they wanted to get him the injection to calm down his behavior. And in addition to that, his parents were paying for it, even though Dr. Phil was supposed to be paying for all of this. It sounds like he needed an inpatient residential treatment that was a dual diagnosis center, because the way their son acted, I'm pretty sure that schizoaffective disorder wasn't the only problem. They do let us know that in today's time, their son is okay and it is in a program and doing well. But let me tell y'all, that daddy, Mr. Dave, he said he cringed at the sight of Dr. Phil on TV and things like that. And that's unfortunate. That's unfortunate, because they pretty much signed their lives away on the show. They sign away the right to their privacy. They sign away their right to sue. They sign away their right to discuss what happened. Like, they don't have the option to walk away if it becomes too much. And honestly, if you are supposed to be a safe space for people going through mental health and other struggles, Dr. Phil, you should have had a team on play to calm people down. Even on the Maury show, when people will run out of there at full sprint, he would go and talk to them, give them a hug, and check on them. Even on Jerry Springer, he had his little moment of not wretchedness at the end. Jerry's little final thought or something, they called it. So I'm looking at him, and the more I watch the show, I'm like, yeah, they got us. I fell for it. They got us. I always felt like he was shady and knew not to trust his advice because he's not a real doctor. But it's just unfortunate to see how exploitive it was when you would never imagine that it could be that way. But we delve into the treatment centers, y'all. And when getting into the treatment centers, I'm going to say in that order that we got to the bottom of things, okay? Because we figure out that Dr. Phil and some of his, staff were being basically, essentially, as we say in the hood, they was being plugged for referring people to their treatment centers. So instead of referring people to treatment centers based on what a person needs, he was referring people to treatment centers that could take people and that have paid him, it sounds like. Now, allegedly, all of this is alleged. Please see the disclaimer in the description of this video, on the bio of my channel, as well as going across on the scrolling ticker. Everything I say is based on what I've seen on television. It is commentary. I cannot say that any of this happened for fact. I'm just giving my opinion because I was not there. So do not come for me legally. I ain't sent for nobody legally, please. But we learn about a gentleman named Anthony Haskins, who Dr. Phil knows, and who came to get a job on the Dr. Phil show because he went to school and was a friend of Dr. Phil's sons, who we used to see on the show. And anonymous staff start speaking out in the documentary and explaining that Anthony only got his job because he knew somebody who knew somebody, which I believe. Clear people do this. Everybody does this. It's who you know. So I get that, but it's concerning that he would put someone with no educational background at all in mental health, like, into it. But okay, Dr. Phil. Now, they introduce a public advocate to us. It's a young woman who says she sent her child off to rehab, and her child did not make it. And she said that now she spends her time helping people to go after the facilities like dual diagnosis treatment centers, rehabs, and other mental health facilities for causing people to leave in situations that are worse than what they came in. And then oftentimes that leads to their untimely demise. Like, so I respect the work that she does. But she said people call her with somebody leaving a body bag. And she lets us know that Creative Care has had a number of complaints in California from the neighborhood that it's in. In California, facilities are always nestled in the like regular neighborhoods and things like that. Half of them Hollywood mansions you see living next door to your celebrities be rehabs and residential centers and things like that. And people protest against them in the neighborhood because if you have a rehab in the neighborhood and someone relapses, then you have people whose safety can very well become at risk depending on the person and what they do. So I can understand why some people were against Creative Care. Those were the neighbor complaints. But the complaints got even worse when we learned that Creative Care, I guess they're facilities that house youth, has reported and called the police over 180 times in just 1 year for missing children, which tells me that people run away. When I worked in residential, and I worked in residential with adults and youth, we actually had a girl that ended up running away. And one of the other girls looked at me and said, I was supposed to go with her, but you work in here. I don't know. You actually listened to us. And it hurt my heart. And I haven't been able to really work in youth mental health since then, because it lets you know, like, people really do go through a lot. You don't know how these kids are treated with every staff member. You don't know what they go through. Just because you think a place is there to help them, it's still regular people working there. So I feel for the neighborhood that these places are in. I also feel for the people that are there that have to leave in body bags or feel the need to run away. Like, that's unfortunate that you could go through so much that's what you feel. But she told the people to record everything that they saw. And this is where E shows us recordings of coroner vans coming up to this facility that Marla and Dave's son was sent to, where they did him dirty. And now everything's starting to come together. And Anthony Haskins, we learned that the people in Creative Care were not supervised. They were like, there was hardly any staff. Nothing was going on. They were left alone in houses with people detoxing, getting sick, tripping out, all this crazy stuff. And if you're dealing with people with substances, you need nurses. You need a lot. It comes up that Anthony Haskins was getting cash for leading a group at Creative Care. And in return for the cash and leading that group, he would refer people to Creative Care on there. Now, I don't know if you guys have heard of that rapper, the Catch Me Outside. How about that? For the Dr. Phil show, Bad Baby. She's effed up in the head and does cultural appropriation in ways that are negative. But I can't blame the girl because of how young she is. And if you watch her episode, her parents are a mess. But she has spoke out about where Dr. Phil sent her and it causing trauma in her life and things like that. So, and Paris Hilton was in one that people got sent to. There was like a whole thing and reckoning that came out about it. But I believe a lot of what was in this documentary, y'all. I just do. But we hear from a bunch of people about all these awful stories about Dr. Phil. And we learned that the Creative Care facility, we're going to later discuss their license suspension because that's a big deal. But before we get to that, a gentleman that was questioning the facilities, because he basically spent time speaking in Congress. His parents sent him somewhere and he was mistreated. And he ended up getting the opportunity to question Dr. Phil. And we got to see it live. But he says that much of the conversation was edited and that Dr. Phil threatened him. And this is where we start to hear about him suing people who speak out. But I like that the gentleman, what he said, he was like, I still asked them questions because I wanted them to know that people are aware. And whether you sue me or not, you're responsible for what happens. So I respected him for that. But we then learned from staff members that Dr. Phil is cool with the Daily Mail and probably many other platforms. And someone on the staff did try to speak out. It sounds like people on the staff did try to speak out about what was going on on that show behind the scenes. But Dr. Phil locked everybody in a room and put security at every door in the building and said, y'all gonna tell me who did this right now. Why are you threatening people? Never trust a white man from Texas. Sorry, I'm saying it. But I don't understand why you're trying to scare people. Like, what are the intimidation tactics for? Like, that's not something anyone should do, mental health or not. Like, that's extra and stupid, Dr. Phil. And cut the rest of that hair off. You're bald while I'm at it. But they bring up membership scams and go way back to the 70s when Dr. Phil was in his 20s, still unattractive, and basically running a program that was alleged to be a membership scam, which is where you sell people, oh, you'll get this membership, we'll take care of you for this. And then the membership that they have, that company just suddenly disappears. So it looks like Dr. Phil is doing the same thing with the membership scams from what they were alluding in this documentary, but with his show and his mental health platform. Dr. Phil ends up firing Anthony Haskins because he was like, why are you taking money from people? It sounds like he didn't really know what was going on and probably had a staff that was too big, but then he also knew what was going on and got too much of a star because why aren't you paying attention to the people you're responsible for? And Creative Care gets their license suspended, but here's the catch. Even after Creative Care's license is suspended to take people in to help, the Dr. Phil show kept sending people there. So you fired Anthony Haskins. You knew their license was suspended and you still send people there. So Evan from the Boston Globe, the investigative journalist throughout this whole documentary, comes back and she writes a piece about exposing Dr. Phil that went viral. And Dr. Phil's office contacted the Boston Globe and said, if you release more about us or don't take this down, we will sue you. So they shut down her investigation into Dr. Phil for further exposure. Now, the Boston Globe provided a comment and says that that is not true and that they have published stuff since then. But in that moment, y'all shut it down. Of course, you've published stuff since then, Boston Globe. The Dr. Phil show is no more. You're protected. But y'all left Evan, whatever the hell her name is, y'all left her out to dry. And my good sis did all that investigative work. And y'all do that? No. But as I stated, 3 years after the Boston Globe exposure or something, the Dr. Phil show ends. He tried to revive it in his company called Merit Street, but they were also accused of shadiness that may have been similar to the membership scams. And as of today, they have filed for bankruptcy, which does not mean Dr. Phil is broke. That just means that this company is. But it doesn't mean he himself is broken. His wife was plugging her skincare and all that stuff on the show. I'm sure they are okay. But what I got from this documentary is what goes on in the dark, y'all, as we always say, what goes on in the dark is always going to come to the light. You just want to do and live your life in the most honest way as possible. Because if you are unapologetically yourself, and if you're doing stuff the right way, then there's no reason to cover your tracks. And then documentaries like this don't come out years later. But that was it for this documentary. I genuinely appreciate anybody who took the time to watch it. I'm trying something new on the channel. I hope that everybody sees the link in the description of this video. There are links to James, who I do a lot of recaps with on reality TV, as well as Kiwan JTV and other great creators. I hope you guys consider that. The next episode for E's Dirty Rotten Scandals will be for Top Model. It's going to go over Tyra Banks' Top Model documentary. And I did see that Janice Dickinson was a part of it. So let me know in the comments if you guys are interested in me covering that. I'll also put in the end of this video so that you guys can see it to click if you're interested in watching my Top Model documentary review. I will include that for you to see after this video. But other than that, beautiful people, I appreciate everybody for watching. I hope y'all like and subscribe. Please share your thoughts in the comments because it's not just about me. I want to hear how y'all feel too. And I will see you next time. Okay.